Now, for this particular task, what I've done is I've prepared a couple of audio files. I want to make sure that you guys are not only getting experience of my speech, but you also need to listen to some of the real recordings, some of the different accents from other parts of the world. Okay, so I'm going to play some recordings now for you guys, right? And, you know, just like a regular summary, if you want to, right, take some notes, and I'll be asking for some volunteers. Okay, let's get started. This is lecture number 1.
For thousands of years, philosophers and astronomers and thinkers of all sorts have imagined that the universe, the space around us, was rather like this floor in front of us. It was fixed and unchangeable, and things happen on it, just as people walk around. So the stars, the comets, and the planets, and the other heavenly bodies moved around and traced down their parts in this completely unchanging stage of space. In the 20th century, as a result of Einstein's work, that view of the universe was completely transformed. We began to understand that there was no absolutely fixed stage of space at all on which all celestial notions were played out. But in some sense, on the larger scale in the universe, the space itself was in this state of continuous dynamic change. That was a prediction made by Einstein, but it wasn't Einstein, the owner of making the discovery that our universe was really like that.
Okay. Now, in terms of difficulty, I would describe that as slightly on the harder end of the scale. Okay, the speaker was talking quite quickly. It was a bit of a scientific, technical topic, right? And the vocabulary, there was definitely a couple of tricky ones in there. Okay, so what I would like you to do, firstly, are there any volunteers who would like to try summarizing that? If you would like to try, type a 1 for me in the chat. Otherwise, if you do have some keywords, what I'd like you to do is just to type some of your keywords into the chat for me. I want to have a look at what kinds of words we got. All right, so I'm just going to quickly write down some of the stuff that you guys are putting in. So Johnny's given me, we've got universe, good, fixed and unchangeable, right? Planet, stars, transformed, absolute fixed space, large scale, dynamic, and Einstein. All right, fantastic. Does anybody else have any different keywords that they want to throw in my direction? All right, Andy's upgraded dynamic to continuous dynamic change. Nice. All right, so that's probably a little bit better than dynamic just by itself, but not necessarily. It depends on whether or not that's actually going to be a useful keyword, right? We also have the word physics. Yes, good, right? And also space. No worries. All right, now what I've got here is a list of keywords, right? So for some of you, you might have keywords that are similar. You might be missing a few from here, and you might have some other ones that I don't have. That's fine, right? And Sophie's also got theory. Let's put that in there too. Okay, so now we've got a list of keywords, but right now we still don't really know what this lecture is necessarily about just by looking at this. Hi asks a good question. Hi asks, what's the marking criteria of the summary? Well, the lecture that we just heard contains some main points, some main ideas that it's trying to communicate, okay? And if we want to have a good summary, basically we just need to tell people what those main points were, right? Now, unfortunately, at this moment, right, just by looking at this list of words, I know that many of these words are important keywords, okay? But I do not actually know what exactly the main point is, do I, right? So there isn't any specific link between these keywords right now. So it's a little bit difficult for me to tell what the main points are and what the main points are not. But to answer your question, the marking criteria is mostly just, did you get the main points or not? Okay, and the computer is looking at your keyword selection. So if you guys did a good job and you gave me all the correct keywords, then essentially we're almost done. All we have to do is put them into sentences. All right, let's have a look, right? I can just directly tell you what the answer is here, right? So let me shrink that down a little bit so you can see our list of keywords. This particular summary contained a couple of points, right? So we started off in the past, right? And the general idea was in the past, right, people thought the universe was fixed and unchangeable, right? Now, what it is, this particular lecture was a bit of a comparison, okay? So it's talking a bit about physics history, let's say, okay? So if I shrink this down a little bit more, right? Our first point is in the past, people thought the universe was fixed and unchangeable, right? What is our keywords in this particular piece? We've got universe and we've got fixed and unchangeable. So you can see that this matches onto these first two keywords up here. Does that make sense? Yeah? So that's the first point. Now the second point, right, was until, right, Einstein proved that actually, right, space was undergoing continuous dynamic change. Okay, so now what are the keywords here, right? We've got Einstein, right? We've got proved, we've got space, and we have continuous dynamic change. Okay, so you can see that this is a bit of it's a timeline of what happened. It's also a bit of a comparison, a compare and contrast type structure, right? Where it was believed one thing, but actually later we proved that it was something else. Okay, now you don't really need to know exactly what fixed and unchangeable or continuous dynamic change actually means, right? In order to get this particular summary. Now, again, right, the second sentence uses some of our keywords, doesn't it, right? So we used Einstein, we used continuous dynamic change, right? We used space, right? And we were missing the word proved, right? So when you understand what the main idea is, sometimes you can find some small minor keywords that you might be missing from your actual summary, okay? And that's kind of it. Right? Evie asks, is there a word limit? Absolutely. Okay. The word limit is 50 to 75 words, and I'll just type that out for you. Right. So the word limit for this particular task is 50 to 70 words. Yeah. Now, one thing I will say though is that generally speaking, word limits do not carry a very large weighting. Okay, so even if you are a bit under or a bit over, it's not like they're going to do a huge penalty. So your top priority is still to make sure that you've got all of the useful information. Okay, that's more important than if you go over a little bit. Yeah, and in this case, you can see my summary is actually very, very short here. So if anything, I probably have to put in some more details. Now that's when, if I want to put in more details, I can put some examples like, you know, in the past, people were looking up at the planets and the stars, and they decided that the universe was fixed and unchanging, right? So I can put in some of these extra keywords that we have. But in terms of the absolutely necessary ones, those are the selections that we need to have in our summary to make sure that we get full content marks. Okay, any questions there? Are we happy with that? Fantastic. All right, excellent. Let's move on to, are 2 sentences enough? Not in terms of the word limit. So if I do a word count here, let's see, my Microsoft Word tells me this is only 24 words, right? So this one was probably an extremely short version. What I can do though, is if I wanted to increase the length, I can put in some extra details, right? So for example, I could say here, in the past, right, people looked up at the stars and planets and they thought the universe was fixed and unchangeable, right? And then you could say something like, however, in modern times, right, Einstein proved that actually, right, space was undergoing continuous dynamic change. Right? And you might say, and this is the model that is currently being used in physics or something like that. Right? So if you want, right, it's very easy to add extra words to your summary. In fact, if you want, you can even use a template. Right? I'm sure a lot of you guys are using templates right now. And that can add a lot of extra words into your summary, right? But in terms of what's absolutely necessary, those couple of short statements, right, with those keywords, that's what you needed for the final answer. Oh, yeah, the content's already done, right? Like I said, my first 2 simple sentences, that's all you needed for the content. Yeah. All the other stuff is like padding, right? So that's all the written discourse, that's your sentence structures, right? That's your form mark, your word count, and all of that stuff. Okay, fantastic. But one thing, just always remember, guys, right? The content is the most important part. It has a very, very heavy weighting for this particular question, right? So if you get your content right, the rest of it is generally pretty easy.